jobs. I talked about command early. Take jobs where you've got to figure out how to take calculated risk. Take jobs where you are going to hold yourself and others will hold you accountable. Responsible jobs. It's another thing I loved about the Navy. I loved about going to sea. I loved ships because I was the accountable officer, and that was a wonderful challenge. So it's and you asked the question, did I feel prepared? I did feel prepared. I'd been around for some 39 years, had a lot of jobs in lots of different places, many of them in Washington later in my life, in my career, and I thought I was ready. I was surprised because the conventional wisdom was that my predecessor, General Pete Pace, was going to stay on for 2 more years. But what happened was he got caught in the political crossfire, and therefore President Bush asked me to take that job, and it was the greatest privilege of my life, quite frankly, for which I'm I'll always be grateful to President Bush and to Secretary Bob Gates for giving me the opportunity.
If you were still chairman, what advice would you have given the president on his recent decision to deploy active duty troops to the southern border to help enforce immigration policy?
I'm not chairman.
All right.
And I don't have, even if I were chairman, typically I wouldn't talk about what my advice was to any president.
Right.
On any issue. That's that's typically given in private.
Okay. Do you see in general society any trends with regard to civil-military relations that you would be comfortable speaking about?
Well, I was hugely concerned about what General Flynn, who was my intelligence officer for over a year, and General Allen did by making speeches at the respective Republican and Democratic national conventions, because I think they actually ended up politicizing the military. Do they have a right to do it? Yes. Are they civilians? Technically, yes. How do the American people see them? They see them as generals, quite frankly. And they weren't the first to ever speak at conventions. I think they were given the most significant positions, if you will. This has been going on for some time. There's a view that when Admiral Crowe retired, endorsed President Clinton, and then ended up as the ambassador to England, to the UK, that was what sort of opened the door, and that was 1992, 1993 timeframe, to this politicization of the military. I've said this a lot of different places. I've been in countries where the military is completely politicized. We wouldn't want to live in any of those countries. So it's all about keeping the military out of politics. And yes, they're retired. I understand that. But my own view is unless they're politicians declared, running for an office or having won an office, they end up politicizing the military because American people look at them as experts, and they look at them much more specifically as military experts than civilians. So that's the worry, that's the trend, and I'm hoping we can turn it around. The last point I'll make on that is, in addition to Flynn and Allen, actually, in my view, politicizing the very institutions they cared about, they're also training our young ones that this is okay. Because you see people that you respect do it, and they've got a lot of followers, then when that officer gets out, they'll do the same thing.
Do you think that there should be policy solutions in that regard, like prohibiting retired flag officers from doing that, or is it just incumbent on them to...
I don't think we could do that. I actually don't think it would be legal. I think we'd probably find our way into court based on freedom of speech or something like that.
Sir, many students here at the Harris School may eventually go into careers that are not explicitly related to national security, but who nevertheless may be very influential at the municipal, state, or federal levels of government. What's one thing you want them to know about the military?
I want them to know that the roughly 2 million men and women that I have the privilege to serve with for 4 years as chairman, and that currently serve as well, active, reserve, and guard, are the best I've ever seen in my life. It's an all-volunteer force. I came in during a draft. They're extraordinary, that they come from fewer and fewer places, as I said, that there are fewer and fewer families that know anything about them, that we need to be talking outside who we are, or outside our own circles, the military, if you will, for the reasons that we talked about earlier. And I also believe that this is a younger generation, based on what I saw in a lot of war, a lot of combat environments, that's going to lead the country in the future in a very successful way. So I have, in pretty tough political times right now, I actually am a glass half full guy, and I think that when these young ones who were in their 20s when I saw them in the fight, they're probably in their late 20s or early 30s now, they're going to lead the country, and we're going to be in good shape. They truly are young men and women of courage and sacrifice and service before self, extraordinarily capable. And that they're willing to die for our country, which many of them have in the last decade and a half, is representative of who they are. There is no higher calling, and that our services are made up of them and their families. And as extraordinary as the men and women who wear the uniform are, their spouses, their kids, their parents, their families, especially the spouses, are equally extraordinary in every sense of the word. And you ought to, if you're an American citizen, you ought to take a minute to meet somebody and understand and engage somebody that's in our military.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Okay. All right.
We really appreciate you doing this.
Okay.
It was great talking to you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Let me know how it comes out.
All right. Yes, sir.
All right. See ya.
Thank you for joining us for this episode featuring Admiral Mike Mullen. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at TYFYS_podcast to get the latest updates about our show.
And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spreaker so you'll get our next episode as soon as it's released. This podcast is produced by Haz Yano and Alec MacMillen. Our creative consultant is Sarah Claudy. Special thanks to Aishwarya Kumar, Anita Joshi, and David Raban. This podcast is a production of University of Chicago Public Policy Podcasts and is in no way intended to reflect the official positions of the Department of Defense or any other military entity. I'm Thomas.
And I'm Nick. See you next time.
Hi, this is Jason Zukis, the host of Have You Heard? The UC3P News Quiz, a podcast where we quiz University of Chicago students on recent entertaining news stories. You can find us on any podcast platform by searching for Have You Heard UC3P and can find out more about our upcoming live shows at facebook.com/HYH News Quiz. Thanks for listening.